That trailer trash is squatting on the floor like a Bowery bum. The phrase dripped with venom, accompanied by boisterous laughter. Larissa, once the heiress of a prominent family, was now mopping the floor of a shopping mall with her little sister. Beside her, a 5-year-old who didn't understand why her sister was trembling. Dressed in a cleaning lady's uniform, she overheard the insults coming from someone who once cried on her shoulder, Eduarda Vasconcelos, a former college acquaintance. Can you imagine what your father would say if he saw you like this? A Noguera sweeping floors. Little Sophia ran over and hugged her sister's leg. Lali, why is that mean witch talking like that? Silence hung heavy. Larissa wanted to disappear. But what no one knew was that someone was watching the scene, and this humiliation would be the start of a turnaround that no one could have imagined. Before we continue, leave a comment saying where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel, because this story will stay with you. A fine drizzle blanketed New York City like a melancholic veil. At Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, amidst corridors smelling of disinfectant and tears, a 20-year-old clutched the hand of a child who was sleeping, drowsy from medication. Larissa Noguera's disheveled hair stuck to her pale face, but her green eyes remained open, fixed on the still form of her grandmother, Miriam. "Be strong, my darling," that weak voice still echoed in her memory. "You carry within you all the strength of the women in our family." 3 weeks later, when her grandmother's heart failed for the last time, Larissa didn't know that those would be the last days of normalcy in her life. The announcement came on a Sunday afternoon. William Noguera was grilling burgers on the terrace of his Upper East Side penthouse, a coveted apartment overlooking the Metropolitan Museum of Art, when his wife, Tabata, rushed in, a piece of paper in her hand. "We have another hearing early tomorrow. The creditors want full payment." Her voice trembled. Larissa, who was playing horsey with her little sister Sophia near the grill, froze. For months, her father and mother had been whispering about debts, expensive treatments, impossibilities. Miriam had battled a rare cancer for 5 years. The best hospitals, the latest experimental treatments, hope had no price. But death apparently did. "Stand up, Sophia." Larissa set the child down. The girl's yellow dress swayed as she ran to hug her father's leg. "Is Daddy going on a trip?" The childish voice cut through the tense silence. William bent down, picking up his daughter. His brown eyes, marked by deep circles, glimmered. "Just for a few days, princess. Magic will come of it." Larissa held her breath. She knew that trip had nothing to do with magic. It was Eduarda Vasconcelos who called first. Larissa was in the college library when her cell phone vibrated. "Have you seen the news?" Her friend's voice trembled with morbid excitement. "What are you talking about?" "Larry, it's about your parents." The world crumbled into fragments, images of a mangled car, heavy rain, a dangerous curve on the Taconic State Parkway, William dead at the scene. Tabata thrown into the river by the force of the impact, uninterrupted search, no body found. Presumed death certificate. Sophia was at daycare when Larissa rushed to pick her up. The director waited in the playground, pale-faced. "My dear, what a terrible tragedy. Your mother called this morning asking about the parent-teacher meeting." Larissa knelt before her little sister. Chocolate eyes, so much like her mother's, stared at her innocently. How to say it, how to explain that their world had ended. "Let's go home, Sophie," she whispered. In the taxi, the rain started again. Sophia hummed. Softly, Larissa held her tiny hand, fighting against the wave of panic rising in her throat. The apartment seemed different when they entered, emptier, colder. On the kitchen table, scattered papers told a story that Larissa would have preferred never to have discovered. Overdue bills piled up in precise chronological order, loan payment books, collection notices, letters from loan sharks, all meticulously organized by her father, a final act of paternal care. The call started that same day. Polite voices from the bank, threatening voices from creditors, falsely compassionate voices from distant relatives. The funeral was an exercise in containment. Larissa held Sophia's hand tightly as acquaintances and strangers offered condolences. At the back of the funeral home chapel, men in ill-fitting suits watched. She recognized them immediately, debt collectors. On the way home, stuck in traffic, Sophia pointed out the window. "Look, Lally, those men again." Larissa's chest tightened. It was the second day in a row that she'd seen the same men. One of them waved cynically. 2 months passed like a painful fog. Larissa managed to pay off part of the debts using her father's life insurance. But it wasn't enough. It never would be. The threats became more explicit. Letters with photos of Sophia's daycare, phone calls in the middle of the night. One day, she found a photo of herself taped to the apartment door with her eyes crossed. Out in red, that was the last straw. One grey Monday found Larissa at the door of the nearest cleaning company. "I need a job urgently," she told the manager, a middle-aged man with a gold tooth that gleamed when he spoke. "Do you have a social security card?" "I have everything in order. You can start tomorrow. Plaza South Mall, afternoon shift. Bring appropriate clothing." The mall was a parallel universe of gleaming glass and bright lights. Larissa wore the blue uniform of the cleaning company, long-sleeved blouse, straight pants, closed-toe shoes. Sophia, lacking money for a babysitter, accompanied, her carrying a backpack full of coloring books and crayons. "Stay here in the corner, okay, Sophie?" Larissa pointed to a less crowded area near the service elevator. "Can I draw the flying prince?" "You can, but quietly." The bucket of water and disinfectant heaved in her hands as she dragged the mop across the marble corridor. The smell of the cleaning product mixed with the expensive perfume that hung in the air. Women in high heels passed by talking loudly, laughing, displaying bags that would be worth months of Larissa's work. That's when she heard the voice. Larissa Nogueira. She looked up, and her heart skipped a beat. Eduarda Vasconcelos was there, standing a few feet away, enveloped in an aura of surprise and superiority. She wore a designer outfit. Discreet but expensive jewelry flashed on her wrists. Beside her, 3 friends watched the scene with morbid interest. "My God, is that really you?" Eduarda approached, her heels echoing on the floor. "I always knew. You were diligent, but cleaning?" Larissa felt the heat rise to her face. She tried to maintain her composure. "Hi, Eduarda, how are you?" "I'm fine. Very well, actually." She gestured vaguely. "Daddy put me on the board at the firm, but you—" "Wow, what a transformation." Eduarda's friends giggled. One of them pointed to Sophia. "And that must be the little sister. How cute." "Manuela, she's sitting on the floor like a Bowery bum," another chimed in, provoking an explosion of laughter. Larissa felt the world spin. Eduarda, the same one who had cried on her shoulder when her fiancé called off the wedding, who had begged for help with her college papers, now looked at her as if she were trash. "Can you imagine what your father would say if he saw you like this? A Nogueira sweeping floors." Eduarda moved closer, her voice now a venomous whisper. "At least you're good for something now. Before you were just a stuck-up daddy's girl." Sophia dropped her coloring book and ran to her sister. Tiny hands grabbed Larissa's leg. "Lali, who is that mean auntie?" The childish question echoed in the corridor. Eduarda and her friends were momentarily speechless. Larissa knelt down, wiping her sister's eyes delicately. "A colleague from Lali's school. Let's continue with our drawing, okay?" But Sophia didn't take her eyes off the intruder. With the innocent cruelty of children, she asked, "Why does the auntie have that witch face?" Eduarda flushed with anger. Her eyes, once mocking, became cold as ice. She opened her mouth to curse when a male voice cut through the air. "Excuse me." Everyone turned around. A tall man in an impeccable dark suit was approaching. His steps were firm, controlled. Dark hair, a few grey strands at the temples, gave him a distinguished air. But it was the eyes that caught attention. Intensely blue, with a spark of something that Larissa couldn't decipher. Cleaning is not a lesser profession, madam, he addressed Eduarda, his voice restrained but cutting. It's an essential profession that maintains the dignity of places like this. Eduarda seemed to shrink under that gaze. They were humiliating a worker in front of a small child, he continued, implacable. I believe you have more important commitments. The group of women quickly moved away, whispering among themselves. Eduarda cast one last hateful look at Larissa before disappearing down the corridor. The man turned to her. His eyes, up close, seemed even more penetrating. I apologize for their rudeness, he said in a softer voice. Are you all right? Larissa, still shaken, could only nod. Sophia, less intimidated, tugged at the stranger's pants leg. Thank you, mister. Lali is the best sister in the world. An almost imperceptible smile touched the man's lips. I can see that. He looked at Larissa. Have a good day. And with that, he walked away, leaving only a subtle scent of expensive cologne in the air. Sophia returned to her drawings, but Larissa remained standing, the mop still in her hands. There was something in that man's gaze. Compassion, recognition. For a moment she felt seen again as a person, not just as an invisible cleaner. Hours later, as she finished her shift, a mall security guard approached her. Are you Larissa Nogueira? Her heart raced. What had she done wrong? Yes, I am. Is something wrong? Mr. Rafael Braganza asked me to deliver this. He held out a white envelope and said it's private. With trembling hands, Larissa opened the envelope. Inside, a simple card with only a few words written by hand. Dignity is not lost, even when it seems we have lost everything. A friend who understands. There was no signature, address, or phone number. Just those words, and an elegant business card with the name Rafael Braganza, Braganza Investments, in gold letters. That night, after putting Sophia to bed, Larissa held the card up to the light. Who was that man? Why had he cared? And more importantly, why had those few words brought forth a silent tear that she couldn't contain? The full moon illuminated the small room they now shared. Sophia breathed softly, a stuffed monster clutched against her chest. In the drawer of the dresser among the simple clothes that now made up her wardrobe, Larissa carefully stored the card. Something had begun that day at the mall, something that would change the course of their lives forever. 3 weeks had passed. Larissa continued with her exhausting routine, waking up at 5 in the morning, preparing breakfast and Sophia's lunchbox, dropping her off at the community daycare center she had managed to get a discount at, working until 6 in the evening, and then picking up her sister. Rafael Braganza's card was still stored in the drawer, untouched, as if it represented a world that didn't belong to her. On a particularly cold Wednesday morning, as she dropped Sophia off at daycare, she noticed a dark car parked across the street. The same vehicle she had noticed in recent days. The tinted windows slowly rolled down, revealing the familiar face of one of the most aggressive debt collectors. Miss Nogueira? The man smiled, showing a gold tooth. We need to talk about that outstanding balance. Larissa's blood ran cold. I already explained that I'm working to pay it off, she replied with the firmest voice she could muster. The problem is the boss doesn't want to wait any longer, and he has a particular interest in well-located properties. The veiled threat was clear. The apartment that remained of the family, small and almost foreclosed on, was the last asset she maintained. Tell your boss I have a payment plan. The man sighed dramatically. Be careful with the girl. His eyes went to the daycare door where Sophia had just entered. It would be sad if something happened to her too, wouldn't it? Accidents happen. Before she could respond, the window went up again and the car drove away. Larissa remained there, trembling, her heart pounding against her chest. That night, instead of going home, she took Sophia to a cheap motel in Times Square. She couldn't risk it. The next morning, while mopping the floor on the second floor of the mall, she was called to the administration office. She walked with her head down, anticipating a complaint, perhaps a dismissal. Complaints about Sophia always being around were frequent. The receptionist led her to a large room with large glass windows that displayed a privileged view of Manhattan. A woman of about 50 years old, grey hair tied in an elegant bun and thin-rimmed glasses, waited seated behind an impeccable desk. "Miss Nogueira?" She stood up, extending her hand. "I'm Luciana Mendonça, an attorney." Larissa shook the extended hand, confused. "Is there a problem?" "On the contrary," Luciana smiled. "I believe I have good news. Please sit down." Larissa obeyed, uncomfortable in the leather chair that seemed to swallow her. Luciana rummaged through some documents. "I represent a client who wishes to remain anonymous for now," she began. "This client has become aware of your current financial situation and wishes to help." An alarm sounded in Larissa's mind. "What kind of help?" she asked cautiously. "Well, two kinds, actually." Luciana pushed a folder towards her. "First, my client has paid off the most urgent debts that weighed on you, especially those with informal creditors." Larissa froze. It wasn't possible. "How?" "Here are the receipts." Luciana opened the folder. "As you can see, the debts were paid off without your name appearing in the process. Legally, the creditors can no longer bother you." Larissa leafed through the documents with trembling hands. Names of loan sharks, exorbitant amounts, stamps of paid. "I don't understand." "My client also offers a full scholarship for you to resume your studies, along with a paid internship in their law office," Luciana continued, as if she were discussing the weather. "The amount is enough for you to rent a suitable apartment and pay for a caregiver for your sister during the period. You are in college or at the internship." Larissa's head was spinning. This couldn't be real. It couldn't be true. She was used to only receiving bad news since the accident. "Who is your client?" she asked, a thread of suspicion in her voice. "And what do they expect in return?" Luciana smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "They like to support promising young people who face difficulties. It's a discreet philanthropist, and they expect nothing in return, except that you study diligently and one day when you can, repay by helping other people." "It's Rafael Bragança, isn't it?" Larissa asked. A flash of surprise passed through the lawyer's eyes. "How did you say?" "Your client. It's Rafael Bragança, the man who gave me his card a few weeks ago." Luciana adjusted her glasses, leaning back in her chair. "Miss Nogueira, I'm not authorized to confirm or deny the identity of my client. What I can say is that this offer is legitimate without any dubious quid pro quo and represents a genuine opportunity." Larissa took a deep breath. Under normal circumstances, she would have been suspicious, she would have refused. But the look in that man's eyes when he defended her dignity, there was something there, something true. "I need to think," she said, finally. Naturally, Luciana handed her a card. "Here's my number. You have a week to decide. Meanwhile, rest assured, those specific creditors won't bother you again." When she left the room, Larissa felt dizzy. She leaned against the wall of the corridor, breathing deeply. The possibility of returning to study, of giving Sophia a decent life, of no longer looking over her shoulder in fear. It was like an impossible dream. But her life had taught her that nothing came without a price. At Luciana Mendonça's home, in the penthouse of a building in Tribeca, Rafael Bragança watched the sea through the large windows, a glass of whiskey in his hand. At 42, he commanded a financial empire built with fierce determination. His newspapers described him as brilliant and ruthless, mysterious philanthropist, the solitary billionaire. Few knew the man behind the legend. "She's suspicious," Luciana commented, entering the room. "She asked directly if it was you." Raphael smiled slightly, without taking his eyes off the horizon. "And what did you say?" "I was evasive as instructed." She sat on the sofa. "Rafa, why so much mystery? Why not simply offer help directly?" He turned around. His blue eyes, normally calculating, gleamed with something different. "Because she would refuse. I saw how she reacted when I defended her. She has pride, dignity." He touched the almost imperceptible scar above his eyebrow. "Remember when you found me?" Luciana nodded. She had known Raphael since adolescence, when he was just a boy full of bruises running away from a violent father. "You were too proud too," she replied. "You almost didn't accept my help. And today I'm here." He raised his glass in a silent toast. "Thanks to you and your parents. She reminded me of myself, you understand. The way she protected her sister, how she faced that situation." His voice faltered slightly. "My mother didn't have that strength." Silence hung between them. For a few moments, Luciana knew this story well. Raphael's mother, systematically beaten by her husband, an influential politician, had killed herself when Raphael was only 12 years old. In the suicide note, she asked her son for forgiveness for not having the strength to protect him. He grew up in the most expensive boarding schools in the country, occasionally visited by his father, who treated him as an investment, not as a son. "I just want to give her the same chance I had," Raphael finally said, "and I want her to accept it on her own merit, not out of pity." Luciana sighed. "You continue to be a well of contradictions, you know. You have a reputation for being a ruthless shark in business, but secretly you finance more than 20 social projects across the country." He shrugged. "Complex people, Luciana. As your goddaughter often says, we are all works in progress." The phone rang, interrupting the conversation. He answered, his posture immediately changing to that of the businessman. "Braganza," he said in a firm voice. "Yes, I'm returning to Chicago tonight. The meeting with the Japanese is confirmed." The world didn't wait, even when the heart asked for a break. 3 days later, Larissa returned to Luciana Mendonca's office. She had thought a lot, researched who Rafael Braganza was, discreetly asked the mall security guards. Everyone described him as a reserved, serious, but fair man. One of the few billionaires who really seemed to care about social causes, although he kept that side away from the spotlight. "I accept the proposal," she said, even before sitting down. Luciana smiled. "I'm happy to hear that. I've already provided all the necessary documentation." During the next 2 hours, they signed papers, discussed practical details. The scholarship would be deposited monthly. The internship would begin as soon as she resumed the course. A real estate agency would contact her to show apartment options near the university. "One last thing." Luciana handed her a sealed envelope. "My client asked me to deliver this personally. Inside the envelope, there was only a brief handwritten note. Don't thank me. Just do the same for someone else when you can. That's how we change the world, one life at a time. P.S. Your sister has spirit. Never let her lose it." There was no signature. There was no need. The following week, Larissa returned to the university. The return was not easy. The looks, the whispers. Everyone knew of the fall of the Nogueiras, but she kept her head up, focused on her studies. On the second day, as she left criminal law class, a familiar voice called her name. "Larissa!" "My God! You're back?" It was John Almeida, her ex-boyfriend from her freshman year. Tall, broad-shouldered and with an easy smile, he seemed genuinely happy to see her. John, she smiled, despite herself. They had broken up amicably when he needed to spend a year in Germany on an exchange program. I heard about what happened. To your parents, he approached, touching her arm gently. I tried to find you, but you disappeared. It was a complicated period, she replied, feeling a familiar warmth rise to her face. They had dated for almost 2 years before he left. Let's get coffee. I need to tell you all about Berlin, he invited, his smile illuminating his strong features. She hesitated. Part of her wanted to accept, to relive that sense of normalcy. Another part knew that things had changed. She had changed. I have class soon, she apologized, but maybe another day. I'll hold you to it, Noguera, he winked, walking away. It's good to have you back. It was good to be back. But as the days passed, Larissa realized that she was returning to a world that was no longer hers. The old colleagues, the superficial, conversations about parties and shopping, everything seemed to belong to a life that no longer existed. In the law office, where she started the internship, she felt more at ease. It was a serious environment focused on public interest causes. Her supervisor, Dr. Henrique Alves, was impressed with her dedication. You have a natural talent for this, Larissa, he commented, after she correctly analyzed a complex human rights case. Few people manage to see beyond the obvious. I learned to look at the details, she replied. Sometimes it's the details that save you. At home, a comfortable 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn Heights, Sophia flourished. At 5 years old, the girl was pure energy and curiosity. Larissa hired a nanny recommended by the lawyer herself, Mrs. Zulaida, a 60-year-old woman with experience caring for children and a heart bigger than the world. This girl is a ray of sunshine, Zulaida always commented. It seems like nothing can extinguish her sparkle. It was true. Despite everything, Sophia maintained that genuine joy that only children can achieve. Every night when Larissa read her a bedtime story, Sophia asked the same questions. Is Mommy watching us from heaven? And Daddy too? They are. Yes, Larissa replied, swallowing her tears. And they are very proud of you. One night, after putting Sophia to sleep, Larissa found an envelope in the mailbox. Inside, a formal invitation to a fundraising reception hosted by the Braganza Foundation for children in vulnerable situations. Her heart raced. Would this finally be the opportunity to thank him personally? The event took place at the luxurious Plaza Hotel on Central Park South. Larissa carefully chose what to wear, a simple but elegant navy blue dress that she had bought at a department store. Her light brown hair fell in natural waves over her shoulders. When she entered the hall, she immediately felt out of place. The New York and Hamptons elite circulated in designer outfits, glittering jewelry catching the light from the crystal chandeliers. Waiters offered champagne in thin glasses. A string quartet played Vivaldi discreetly in a corner. Larissa? She turned around and found Luciana Mendonça, elegant in a black dress. I'm glad you came, the lawyer smiled. You look stunning. Thank you for the invitation, Larissa replied. I confess I feel a little out of place. Nonsense. Luciana took her arm. Come, there are some people I would like you to meet. As they circulated through the hall, Larissa couldn't help but look for Raphael with her eyes. She was nervous, anxious. What would she say when she found him? How would she adequately thank him for something so transformative? Luciana introduced her to several lawyers, judges, and business executives. Most asked polite questions about her internship and studies, but Larissa felt that something else was going on. It was almost as if she were being evaluated. He's here, she whispered to Luciana when they had a moment alone. Rafael Braganza. The lawyer hesitated. Yes, he is. He always comes to the foundations. events, although he prefers to stay behind the scenes. She looked directly into Larissa's eyes. But perhaps it's best not to approach him today. Why? Let's just say, he's going through a difficult time, personal matters. Before they could continue the conversation, a buzz swept through the hall. Near the entrance, Larissa spotted John Almeida, impeccable in a grey suit. Beside him, a stunning woman, blonde and tall, with a red dress that drew attention wherever she went. "Priscilla Dantas," Luciana commented, following her gaze. "The new Instagram sensation. Influencer, model, and apparently your colleague's girlfriend." Larissa felt a pang in her chest that she couldn't identify. Jealousy? It couldn't be. It had been so long, but seeing John with another woman so at ease in that glamorous world stirred a strange feeling. "How are you, Larissa?" John approached, smiling broadly. "I didn't know you'd be here today." "It was a last-minute invitation," she replied, trying to appear casual. "This is Priscilla," he introduced his companion, who examined her from head to toe with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, so you're the famous ex." Priscilla extended a hand with perfectly manicured nails. "John talks about you a lot." "I hope good things." Larissa forced a smile, feeling the tension in the air. "The best," John interrupted quickly. "And how is little Sophia doing?" Larissa's face lit up naturally. "Growing like a weed. She's in preschool now. She loves to draw." "That reminds me." Priscilla intertwined her arm with John's possessively. "We need to greet the senator. It was a pleasure, Larissa." As they walked away, Larissa released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Luciana watched the scene with interest. "Old flame?" she asked. "Very old," Larissa replied, although she felt a slight tremor in her voice. "And you? Do you know Priscilla?" "Only by reputation," Luciana frowned. "She has a significant online presence, but I've heard stories about questionable methods she uses to get contracts and partnerships." At that moment, the string quartet stopped. A middle-aged man took to the small stage to announce the start of the official speeches. Larissa looked for a discreet place near a column. Several business executives spoke briefly about the importance of social responsibility until they finally announced, "And now, with the floor, the founder of the Braganza Foundation, Mr. Rafael Braganza." The hall fell silent as Rafael walked onto the stage. Wearing an impeccable dark suit, he seemed even more imposing than Larissa remembered. There was something in his posture that exuded natural authority, but his eyes seemed burdened with a deep sadness that contrasted with his articulate speech. "The foundation was born from a simple conviction," he said, his deep voice filling the room, "that every child deserves a chance, not out of charity or pity, but as a fundamental human right. What we do is not philanthropy in the conventional sense. It's restorative justice." The audience applauded politely. Larissa, however, remained still, captivated by something in the way he spoke, as if each word came from a lived experience, not a rehearsed speech. "Talking about vulnerable children as statistics is convenient," he continued. "It dehumanizes the pain. But behind every number there is a name, a face, a potential that can be lost if we don't act. Our responsibility is to create environments where these children can not only survive, but thrive." As the speech continued, Larissa couldn't take her eyes off him. There was an intensity in that man that went beyond his imposing appearance, as if he carried an invisible weight, a personal mission that transcended business. At the end, when the applause echoed through the hall, their eyes met for a brief moment. She could have sworn that he recognized her, that a flash of recognition passed through those penetrating blue eyes. But just as it came, it was gone. He stepped down from the stage and was immediately surrounded by important people, all wanting A few minutes of his attention. Impressive, isn't he? Luciana's voice brought Larissa back to reality. Very, she replied sincerely. Has he always been like this? Not always. Luciana smiled enigmatically. I met Raphael when we were teenagers. My parents took him in at a difficult time. He was different, more closed off, harder. What changed him? Luciana watched her godson from a distance, now talking to a group of executives. Time, determination, and perhaps the understanding that power without purpose is empty. The night went on. Larissa talked to some people, observed others. In a corner she saw Priscilla Dantas taking strategic selfies with celebrities. John seemed bored beside her. When she was already thinking about saying goodbye, she felt a presence behind her. She turned around and found herself face to face with Rafael Braganza. Up close, she noticed details that she hadn't noticed before. Small wrinkles at the corners of his eyes, an almost imperceptible scar above his left eyebrow, the fatigue veiled behind his impeccable posture. "Miss Nogueira," he greeted, with a slight nod of his head. "Thank you for your presence. You know who I am." It wasn't a question. An almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "Naturally. Why the anonymity?" she asked directly. "Why all this staging?" He studied her for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. "Because genuine help doesn't seek recognition or gratitude," he replied finally. "And because I believe you deserve to be seen for your talents, not as a charity case. I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me," he interrupted her gently. "Just make good use of the opportunity." A silence settled between them, not exactly uncomfortable, but charged with something indefinable. "How is your sister doing?" he asked, surprising her. "Sophia, she's fine, adapting. It's amazing how resilient children are." "They are," he agreed, a different gleam in his eyes, "until the world teaches them not to be." There was something in that statement, a deep pain that Larissa couldn't decipher. Before she could respond, an elegant woman approached. "Raphael, the ambassador is asking for you," she said, casting a curious glance at Larissa. "Of course," he replied, returning to his formal posture. "Miss Nogueira, it was a pleasure. I hope to hear good news about your progress." And with that, he walked away, leaving Larissa with the strange feeling that there was much more behind. In that man than she had ever imagined. On the other side of the room, John watched the interaction with interest. Beside him, Priscilla frowned. "Who is that with your ex?" she asked, a possessive tone in her voice. "Rafael Braganza," John replied. "One of the most powerful men in the country." Priscilla's eyes gleamed. "Interesting, very interesting." Larissa didn't notice the calculating gaze that followed her when she left the party, nor did she imagine the gears that were beginning to turn. The next morning, as she prepared breakfast for Sophia, a notification lit up her cell phone. A photo of her talking to Raphael had been posted on a gossip profile, with the caption, "Ex-heiress returns to society. What is the true interest of the solitary billionaire?" The storm was just beginning. The coffee spilled on the table when Larissa dropped the cup, her eyes fixed on the cell phone screen, reading and rereading the caption under the photo. How had this happened? Who could have taken that picture and, worse, completely distorted the context? "Lali, are you okay?" Sophia asked, her little face worried as she watched her sister frantically clean up the spilled coffee. "I am, honey," Larissa forced a smile. "I'm just a little distracted today." As she dropped Sophia off at school, Larissa received 3 more notifications. The photo was spreading, shared by larger gossip profiles. Mean comments surfaced. Gold digger? And from cleaning lady to billionaire's mistress in record time. On her way to college, she called Luciana. "I've already seen it," the lawyer said, even before Larissa could explain. "We're monitoring the situation. Raphael has already." been informed. How did this happen? Who could have... The event was full of people with cameras, Larissa. It could have been anyone, Luciana sighed, but I have my suspicions. When she arrived at the university, Larissa felt the stares, the whispers. She kept her head up, remembering the words her father always repeated, Nogueiras do not bow before adversity. She entered constitutional law class and sat in her usual place. Minutes later, John slid into the seat next to her. I saw the posts, he said softly. Are you okay? I will be, she replied dryly. Larissa, He hesitated. I need to tell you something. It was Priscilla who took the photo. Larissa turned sharply. What? She secretly manages this gossip. Profile. It's part of what she calls media strategy. He seemed genuinely embarrassed. I didn't know she would do that, I swear. Anger bubbled inside Larissa. And now that you know, what do you intend to do? John looked away. I asked her to take it down, but you don't want to upset your influencer girlfriend, Larissa completed. Some things never change, do they, John? You always choose the most comfortable path. The professor entered the room, interrupting the conversation. Throughout the sound, glass. Larissa barely managed to concentrate. Her phone kept vibrating with notifications that she refused to check. During the break, she ran to the bathroom and locked herself in a stall, breathing deeply to contain the tears of frustration. When she came out, she ran into Eduarda Vasconcelos. How does it feel to be the newest topic of the university? Eduarda smiled maliciously. You know, I always thought you had a special talent for social climbing. Larissa felt her blood boil. At least I never needed to step on people to climb, Eduarda, she replied with studied calm. How is your father doing? I heard the financial fraud lawsuit is moving forward. The smile disappeared from Eduarda's face. It was public knowledge that her father, an influential banker, was facing serious charges. Larissa didn't feel pleasure in using that against her, but she had learned that some people only understood the language they spoke. When she arrived at the office for her internship, the secretary greeted her with a worried look. Dr. Henrique wants to see you immediately, she informed her. Larissa took a deep breath before entering her supervisor's office. He was sitting behind his oak desk, an indecipherable expression on his aged face. Miss Nogueira, he began, indicating the chair in front of him. I imagine you know why I called you. I have an idea, she replied, keeping her voice firm. Dr. Henrique slid a tablet over the table, the same photo, now with even more sensational headlines. Our office deals with extremely sensitive cases, some involving public figures, he explained. We can't afford to be associated with gossip. This is a misunderstanding, Larissa hastened to explain. That conversation was completely professional. Mr. Braganza is just a... Henrique raised his hand, interrupting her. You don't need to give me explanations, Larissa. I've known Raphael for years. I know what kind of man he is. He adjusted his glasses. In fact, he called me this morning. He called. Yes, to ensure that this unfortunate incident did not harm your position here. The lawyer smiled slightly. He was quite persuasive. Relief ran through Larissa's body like a warm wave. Thank you for understanding. Don't thank me yet. Dr. Henrique leaned forward. We need to be strategic here. I suggest you keep a low profile for the next few days. Work remotely, if possible. And as for Raphael, there's nothing between us, Larissa interrupted, perhaps too quickly. Henrique studied her for a moment. Appearances matter, Larissa. Always. Especially for young women at the beginning of their careers. She nodded, swallowing the answer she wanted to give. He was right, even if it irritated her deeply. 2 days later, while organizing study materials at home, Sophia ran to her, excited. Lali, There's a woman on TV talking about you. Larissa ran to the living room. On the afternoon gossip show, a platinum-haired presenter displayed the photo of her with Raphael, now in the spotlight. Sources close to the situation claim that billionaire, Rafael Bragança, has paid off millionaire debts of former socialite Larissa Nogueira, said the presenter with a malicious smile. And maybe it's not just charity. The phone rang. It was Luciana. We're taking care of it. The lawyer sounded furious. We've already identified the source of this information. We're preparing a legal notice. Was it Priscilla? Larissa asked, although she already knew the answer. With the help of Eduardo Vasconcelos, yes, Luciana confirmed. They managed to access some details about the financial assistance through a bank employee. It's a violation of banking secrecy, Larissa. That's a crime. The doorbell rang, startling her. Larissa peeked through the peephole and saw John. I need to hang up, she said to Luciana. I'll call you later. Opening the door, she found John with a dejected expression. I just saw the report, he said, clearly disturbed. I came to check if you're okay. Considering the circumstances, I am, Larissa replied, letting him in. Where is Priscilla? We broke up. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. When I confronted her about leaking your banking information, she just laughed, said, that's how you build a brand. I didn't recognize the person I was with. Sophia appeared at the door of the room, watching John with curiosity. Hi, Uncle John, she exclaimed, recognizing him from old photos. Hey, little Sophia. He smiled genuinely. How you've grown. While Sophia showed her drawings to John, Larissa reflected. Part of her wanted to believe that he had changed, that he was truly sorry. Another part remembered that John always appeared, when it was convenient. Why did you really come, John? She asked when Sophia returned to her room. He hesitated. I owe you an apology, Larissa. For everything. For not being there when you lost your parents. For not being the friend you needed. He seemed genuinely tormented. And now, for not preventing Priscilla from doing this. I still wonder if you really broke up with her, or if it was just another fight, Larissa observed, crossing her arms. This time it's final. I saw who she really is, he approached. And maybe I realized something else, who I stopped seeing for all this time. Larissa recoiled instinctively. No, John, don't do that. Her voice was gentle but firm. I'm not looking for a relationship now, especially not with someone from my past. A flash of disappointment crossed his face. I understand, he said finally. Friends, then. Friends, she agreed with a small smile. Now I need to take care of some things. After John left, Larissa checked her cell phone again. The story continued to spread, and the worst part, some publications were questioning the legitimacy of her college. Scholarship and position at the office. Her reputation, so carefully rebuilt, was crumbling because of lies and distortions. In his penthouse office in Chicago, Rafael Bragança watched the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. The afternoon light bathed the skyscraper horizon, but his thoughts were far away. The notifications have been sent to all media outlets, Marcelo, his legal advisor, informed him. Most have already removed the content. We identified those responsible, Priscilla Dantas and Eduardo Vasconcelos. Rafael remained silent for a few moments. And Miss Nogueira? He asked finally. She's being resilient, Marcelo replied, choosing his words. But the damage to her reputation is considerable. There are questions about the merit of her position at the office and the university. Rafael turned, his face a mask of studied calm, but his blue eyes flashed. I want a complete dossier on both of those responsible. Professional and financial history, contracts, partnerships, everything. Sir, with all due respect. I'm not going to destroy these women, Marcelo, Rafael clarified, reading his advisor's thoughts. But I want to understand who we're dealing with. That night, While reviewing important documents, Raphael couldn't get Larissa out of his thoughts. There was something about her that touched him deeply, the dignity with which she faced each situation, the dedication to her little sister, the refusal to be victimized by circumstances. He remembered himself, decades ago. The difference was that he hadn't had anyone to protect him when he needed it most. His phone rang. It was Luciana. "We have a problem," the lawyer's voice sounded, tense. "It seems that Priscilla Dantas gained access to internal Foundation documents. She's threatening to release information about your family background." Raphael's hand tightened on the phone. "How?" "Apparently she dated one of the archive employees before John. She's using this to try to pressure us to back down on the legal notices." A heavy silence followed. Raphael had spent decades burying his past, his father's violence, his mother's suicide, the years of boarding school, the scars, both physical and emotional. If that came to light now, in the worst possible way, "How much does she want?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. "It's not money she wants, Raphael," Luciana replied. "She wants exposure, recognition, and it seems she has a specific plan that involves completely discrediting Larissa." "Why? What is her interest in Larissa?" "Jealousy, apparently, and opportunism. She saw a chance to promote herself at the expense of a sensational story." Raphael took a deep breath, making a decision. "Prepare a press conference for tomorrow," he instructed. "I'm going to tell my story on my terms." "Raphael, are you sure? You've spent decades protecting your privacy." "Some things are more important than privacy, Luciana, like dignity and justice." The next morning, Larissa was giving Sofia a bath when the doorbell rang. Opening it, she found Luciana Mendonça, elegant as always, but with a serious expression. "We need to talk," said the lawyer, entering. "It's about Raphael." While Sofia watched cartoons in the living room, Luciana explained the situation in the kitchen. How Priscilla had obtained documents about Raphael's past. How she was threatening to use this to create a narrative that would harm both of them. "He's going to give a press conference this afternoon," Luciana concluded. "He's going to tell everything, on his terms." Larissa felt a pang in her chest. "Because of me?" she asked, horrified. "He can't do that." "It's not just because of you, Larissa." Luciana took her hands. "It's for himself. You don't understand what that man carries, the weight he's carried for decades." "Then explain it to me," Larissa pleaded. "Who is Raphael Bragança, really?" Luciana hesitated, pondering how much she could reveal. His father, Augusto Bragança, was an influential politician, extremely abusive in private. Raphael's mother, Elena, suffered years of domestic violence until she couldn't take it anymore. Luciana took a deep breath. She killed herself when Raphael was 12 years old. In the farewell letter, she asked her son for forgiveness for not being strong enough to protect him. Larissa brought her hand to her mouth, horrified. My God! He grew up in expensive boarding schools, occasionally visited by his father, who saw him as an investment, not as a son. When he was 16 during a holiday at home, Raphael finally confronted his father after seeing him assaulting a maid. Luciana continued. The fight was brutal. Raphael ended up in the hospital. That's when my parents, who knew the situation, intervened legally and obtained his guardianship. And the father died a few years later. Car accident. Luciana paused. Raphael inherited everything and transformed the family fortune, built on corruption and influence, into a legitimately successful empire. But he never fully recovered from the trauma. That's why he's so reserved. That's why he helps vulnerable children and young people. And that's why he helped Sofia and me. Larissa completed, the pieces falling into place. When he saw you that day at the mall, protecting your sister so fiercely, even while being humiliated. Something connected, Luciana explained. He saw someone with the strength that his mother didn't have. The strength to protect a child at all costs. Larissa felt tears in her eyes, a deeper understanding taking shape. "Where will the interview be?" she asked. "At the Foundation headquarters, at 3 p.m. "Why?" "Because he's not going to face this alone," Larissa replied, determined. The auditorium of the Braganza Foundation was packed. Journalists, photographers, and cameras occupied every available space. In the front row, executives and board members waited nervously. Raphael walked onto the stage alone, wearing a dark suit. No advisors, no public relations team, just him and a microphone. The room fell silent as he positioned himself. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice firm. "Thank you for being here. Recently, speculation has arisen about my private life and about the nature of my relationship with a young lawyer and scholar at our foundation. I am here to clarify the situation." He paused, looking directly at the cameras. "Larissa Nogueira received financial and professional assistance from our foundation by the same objective criteria that we apply to dozens of talented young people annually. Her academic merit and her vulnerable situation made her eligible. There is no other type of relationship between us." Flashes fired constantly. Raphael took a deep breath before continuing. "I have also been informed that details about my personal history are being used as a form of blackmail. Therefore, I have decided to share that story on my own terms." And then, for the first time in his public life, Raphael Braganza spoke about his past. About the abusive father, the mother who couldn't protect him, the years of isolation. He spoke in a firm voice, without dramatics, facing each word as he had faced each scar. "I created the Braganza Foundation for a simple reason, so that other children and young people would have the assistance that I didn't have when I needed it most," he explained. "So that other women like my mother would find strength and support to transform a legacy of pain into a legacy of hope." At the back of the auditorium, Larissa watched, her hands trembling. Beside her, Luciana discreetly held a handkerchief. "Any attempt to distort this mission through malicious gossip will be treated with the full force of the law," Raphael concluded, "and any action that harms the reputation of the scholars at our foundation will be faced with equal seriousness." The journalists began to raise their hands, eager for questions. But before Raphael could choose someone, a commotion at the back of the auditorium caught everyone's attention. Larissa walked down the central aisle, determined. Eyes turned to her, murmurs growing through the room. Raphael paused momentarily as he saw her approach the stage. "Excuse me?" Larissa picked up a second microphone, her voice surprisingly firm. "My name is Larissa Nogueira, and I would also like to speak." The auditorium exploded in flashes. Raphael watched her, a silent question in his eyes. "I lost my parents a little over a year ago," she began. "I discovered debts I wasn't aware of. I had to drop out of college to support my 5-year-old sister. I worked as a cleaning lady proudly, because honest work will never be a cause for shame." Her voice gained strength with each word. "The Braganza Foundation offered me a second chance when I needed it most. A scholarship, an internship, an opportunity to rebuild my life with dignity," she continued. "What is happening now is an attempt to transform an act of institutional generosity into a fabricated scandal." She looked directly at the cameras. "Ms. Priscilla Dantas and Ms. Eduarda Vasconcelos, who are behind these false stories, illegally obtained confidential information. This is a crime," she stated categorically, "and as a future lawyer, I guarantee that they will be held legally accountable for their actions." In the corner of the auditorium, John watched with a mixture of pride and admiration. Beside him, Mrs. Zulaidi held Sophia's hand, who looked in wonder at her older sister. Mr. Braganza didn't need to expose his painful personal history today, Larissa continued, but he did so to protect the integrity of a program that benefits dozens of young people. That speaks volumes about his character. She turned briefly to Raphael, meeting his gaze. Something silent passed between them, a mutual understanding that transcended words. We are two human beings who know the pain of loss and the value of rebuilding, she concluded. Nothing more, nothing less. Thank you for your time. When she finished, the auditorium remained silent for a few seconds before exploding with questions. Raphael, for the first time in years, seemed speechless. There was something new in his eyes when he looked at Larissa, something that not even he fully understood. 3 weeks later, the dust was beginning to settle. The press conference had become a turning point. Raphael's story of overcoming adversity, combined with Larissa's dignity and eloquence, won over the public. From a possible scandal, the narrative transformed into an inspiration for overcoming. The charges against Priscilla and Eduarda for invasion of privacy were moving forward in the courts. One Sunday morning, Larissa was making pancakes for Sophia when the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," Sophia shouted, running to the door. Before Larissa could stop her, the girl had already opened the door. Rafael Braganza was there, clearly uncomfortable, holding a wrapped package. "Hi, Uncle Raphael," Sophia exclaimed, to the surprise of both of them. "Hello, Sophia," he replied, a small smile softening his normally serious face. "Is your sister home?" Larissa appeared in the hallway, wiping her hands on a dish towel, surprised by the unexpected visit. "Raphael, come in, please." He entered hesitantly, seeming strangely vulnerable outside of his corporate environment. Sophia watched him with fascination. "Do you have an airplane?" she asked abruptly, with the typical candor of children. "Sophia!" Larissa scolded, embarrassed. Raphael smiled, a genuine smile. "I do," he replied, crouching down to be at the girl's height. "But did you know that when I was your age I dreamed of being an astronaut?" Sophia's eyes widened. "Really? Me too," she declared enthusiastically. "I want to go to Mars." "Well, then you'll have to study a lot of math," he replied seriously. "Can I give you a gift that will help with that?" He held out the wrapped package. Sophia looked at Larissa, who nodded, allowing her to accept. Inside was a portable telescope and an illustrated book about the solar system. "Wow!" exclaimed Sophia, her eyes shining. "Lali, look! I can see real stars." "It's beautiful," Larissa smiled, moved by the expression of pure joy on her sister's face. "What do we say to Uncle Raphael?" "Thank you, Uncle Raphael." Sophia threw herself into his arms without warning, hugging him tightly. For an instant, Raphael seemed to freeze, clearly unaccustomed to spontaneous displays of affection. But then, slowly, his arms wrapped around the little girl. Something in his face transformed, a vulnerability that Larissa had never seen before. "You're welcome, astronaut," he replied, his voice slightly husky. "Can I set it up now?" Sophia asked, already moving away with the telescope. "In your room, while I talk to Uncle Raphael," Larissa instructed. When Sophia skipped away happily, a momentary silence fell between them. "Coffee," Larissa offered. "Please," he accepted, following her to the kitchen. The apartment was small but cozy. Sophia's drawings decorated the refrigerator. Law books shared space with stuffed animals on the shelves. It was a real home, not just a place to live. "I came to thank you," Raphael said finally, as Larissa poured the coffee. "What you did in that interview, no one had ever spoken out in my defense like that." "I just told the truth," she replied, sitting down across from him. "And besides, I also had scores to settle with those two." A discreet smile appeared on Raphael's face. "I heard that Priscilla Dantas lost all of her advertising contracts after the scandal." And Eduarda was suspended from college for violating the code of ethics, Larissa added, taking a sip of coffee. Apparently, justice exists. They were silent for a few moments, listening to Sophia's animated voice in the room, explaining to her stuffed animals how the telescope worked. There's another reason for my visit, Raphael finally said. I received an unusual call yesterday. Larissa tilted her head, curious. A woman contacted the foundation asking about you, he continued, his eyes carefully studying her reaction. She saw the press conference, said her name was Tabata Nogueira. Larissa's world stopped. The cup trembled in her hand, spilling coffee on the table. That's impossible, she whispered. My mother is... Apparently not, Raphael replied softly. She's been hospitalized in a rehabilitation clinic in upstate New York for over a year. She was rescued from the river, unconscious, without documents. She had severe traumatic amnesia. Only recently has she begun to recover fragments of memory. Tears flooded Larissa's eyes. An entire year, a year of mourning, of struggle, of pain, while her mother was alive just a few hours away. She saw your photo on television and had a moment of clarity, Raphael continued. The clinic contacted me because your name was associated with mine in the report. Is she okay? Larissa asked, her voice trembling. She's recovering. The accident caused some neurological damage, but the doctors are optimistic. He hesitated. She really wants to see you and Sophia. Larissa covered her face with her hands, trying to process everything. Joy, shock, anger, relief, a storm of contradictory emotions. I've arranged everything if you want to visit her, Raphael offered. A car, accommodations near the clinic. Why are you doing all this? Larissa asked abruptly, facing him. Why do you care so much? Raphael seemed surprised by the question. After a moment, he replied with a disarming sincerity, Because no one did this for me, he said simply. When I lost my mother, I was completely alone. No one lifted a finger to help. They just turned their backs, pretending not to see. His gaze met hers. When I saw you in that mall, protecting Sophia so fiercely, even while being humiliated, I saw something that I deeply admired. I saw the chance to make a difference at least once. A tear ran down Larissa's face. I don't know if I'm ready, she admitted. To see her, to explain to Sophia. You don't have to be ready now, he assured. Take all the time you need. I'll be here to help in any way I can. The sincerity in his voice touched something deep within Larissa. Thank you, she said, recomposing herself. Not just for this, but for everything. Don't thank me, he replied, repeating the words he had written to her months ago. Just do the same for someone else when you can. Sophia burst into the kitchen, the astronomy book open in her tiny hands. Uncle Raphael, look, this is Jupiter. It has 79 moons. 79, she exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement. Can I see them through the telescope? Some of them, yes, he replied. And to Larissa's surprise, he stood up and knelt down to be at the girl's height. Want me to show you how? While Raphael patiently explained about planets and moons to Sophia, Larissa watched the scene with a new understanding. The man the world knew as a ruthless billionaire was there in her kitchen, teaching astronomy to a 5-year-old with a gentleness that few would ever see. 2 weeks later, Larissa stood before the Santa Clara Clinic in the mountains of upstate New York. Sophia held her hand, wearing a yellow dress that she had chosen especially for the occasion. Raphael waited discreetly in the car, respecting the privacy of the moment. Will Mommy recognize me? Sophia asked, her little voice trembling slightly. Of course she will, sweetie. Larissa knelt down, tucking a strand of hair behind her sister's ear. You're unforgettable. When they entered the simple but cozy room, Tabata Nogueira was sitting near the window, thinner, with shorter hair and a few premature grey strands, but unmistakably her mother. "Mommy!" Sophia let go of Larissa's hand and ran. Tabitha turned, her eyes instantly tearing up. "My baby," she whispered, opening her arms. "My little Sophia." Larissa remained standing at the door, watching the emotional embrace. When her mother finally raised her eyes to her, a sob escaped. "My Larissa!" Tabitha extended an arm, holding Sophia close to her chest with the other. "My strong girl." The three-way hug was like the closing of a circle, the filling of an absence that had ached for too long. "I'm so sorry," Tabitha murmured through tears. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there when you needed me most." "You're here now," Larissa replied, kissing her mother's forehead. "That's all that matters." In the parking lot, Raphael watched the clinic from a distance. He was about to start the car and leave when he noticed Larissa walking toward him. She got into the vehicle, her eyes still red from crying, but with a radiant smile. "She wants to meet you," she said simply. "I don't want to intrude on a family moment." He hesitated. "Raphael," she lightly touched his arm. "You're part of this now, please." Something in those words, in that touch, made his heart race in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. Reluctantly, he followed her. Tabata Noguera, holding Sophia in her lap, smiled when she saw Raphael enter the room. There was so much gratitude in her gaze that he felt uncomfortable, unaccustomed to receiving such sincere emotion. "So, you're the guardian angel of my girls," she said, extending her hand. "Just a person who recognized value when he saw it," he replied, shaking her hand gently. "Mom, Uncle Raphael gave me a telescope," Sophia exclaimed. "I'm going to be an astronaut and go to Mars." Everyone laughed, the tension dissipating. For a moment, they were just four people sharing a space, connected by something deeper than circumstances. 6 months passed. Tabata's rehabilitation progressed more quickly than the doctors had expected. Soon, she would be discharged. Larissa had graduated with honors and started working as a junior lawyer at Henrique's office, focusing on cases of women in vulnerable situations. Raphael continued to manage his business, but something had changed. He visited Larissa's house frequently, always bringing books for Sophia, who now affectionately called him Uncle Star. Sunday dinners had become an unofficial tradition. One autumn afternoon, while Tabitha and Sophia played in the park near the apartment, Larissa and Raphael walked a few steps behind. "She's so happy," Larissa commented, watching her mother push Sophia on the swing. "I hardly recognize the sad and submissive woman who lived for years in my father's shadow." "People can change when they get a second chance," Raphael replied. "Sometimes we need to lose everything to discover who we really are." Larissa stopped, turning to him. "I don't think I ever thanked you properly," she said. "Not just for the financial help, but for believing in me when not even I believed in myself." Raphael smiled, that rare smile that completely transformed his face. "You would have made it anyway, Larissa. People like you always find a way." "People like us," she corrected, her eyes meeting his. Something changed in the air between them, a different tension, an unspoken possibility. Raphael took a step forward, hesitant, as if he feared breaking a spell. "Larissa, he began, but was interrupted by Sophia's joyful shout. "Lali, Uncle Raphael, come see what I can do." The moment dissipated, but didn't disappear. It would just wait for the right time. 2 years later, the garden of the Nogueira's new house was decorated with lights and flowers. Tabata, fully recovered and working as a volunteer in a women's support NGO, arranged the table settings with Mrs. Zulaide, who remained an essential part of the family. Sophia, now 7 years old, ran across the lawn in a bridesmaid dress, chasing butterflies. Her passion for astronomy had only grown, and her room was a small planetarium. On the porch, Larissa waited, dazzling in a simple wedding dress. Beside her, Dr. Henrique, Who would lead her down the makeshift aisle? Your father would. Be proud, he said, offering his arm. I've never seen such a brilliant lawyer so early in her career. Thank you for trusting me, she replied, moved. The small ceremony brought together only close friends and family. Luciana Mendonça discreetly dabbed a tear when the wedding march began to play. At the altar, Raphael waited, more relaxed and happy than anyone had ever seen him. Beside him as best man was John, who had finally found his way as a volunteer doctor in underserved communities and had become a true friend to the couple. When Larissa walked toward him, Raphael felt his heart race, like on that first day in the mall, when he saw a young mother fiercely defending her little sister. The circle was complete. You look beautiful, he whispered when she reached his side. And you look less intimidating today, she joked, making him laugh. The judge, a long-time friend of Raphael's, smiled at the bride and groom before beginning. We are here to celebrate not just a union, but an extraordinary journey, he said. From loss to redemption, from darkness to light. As the vows were exchanged, Sophia watched everything with shining eyes. In her dress, there was a small star-shaped brooch, a gift from Raphael on the day he asked her permission to marry her sister. I promise to be not only your husband, but your partner in every struggle, Raphael declared, his voice firm but emotional. I promise to always remember that true strength is not in power or money, but in the courage to start over, in the humility to learn, and in the ability to love, even when it hurts. Larissa smiled through her tears. I promise to be not only your wife, but your companion in every challenge, she replied. I promise to always remember that our story didn't start in perfection, but in vulnerability, that we found each other. Not when we had everything, but when we had lost almost everything. When the rings were exchanged and the kiss sealed the union, the guests applauded. Sophia ran to hug the newlyweds, being lifted into Raphael's arms. Now we're a real family, exclaimed the girl. Tabitha approached, hugging her daughter and son-in-law. We've always been a family, she said softly. We just found new ways to exist. Later, during the small reception, Raphael and Larissa watched the guests dancing under the stars. 2 years ago, you asked me why I cared so much, Raphael commented, holding her hand. The truth is that the moment I saw you protecting Sophia in that mall, something awakened in me. What? Larissa asked. Hope, he replied simply. The hope that there are people who, even in the face of the worst, keep their essence intact. That no matter how dark it gets, there will always be those who carry light. She rested her head on his shoulder, watching Sophia dance with her grandmother. And now? She asked. What comes after this whole journey? Raphael smiled. That smile. That was still rare but increasingly frequent. Now comes the hardest and most beautiful part, he replied. Living, simply living one day after the other, building something that isn't perfect, but is true. Larissa looked at the starry sky, at the same moon that had illuminated her room that night when she had stored Raphael's card in the drawer, without imagining what would come next. You know what my father used to say, she commented. That life isn't about avoiding storms, but learning to dance in the rain. Your father was a wise man. Raphael kissed her forehead, and his daughter, the most extraordinary woman I've ever met. Sophia ran to them, pulling both onto the dance floor. Come on, everyone has to dance at the wedding. And so, under the light of the moon and the stars, 3 lives that had been separated by pain found a new beginning together.